Viriato, a simple Lusitanian shepherd, who at one point picked up a falcata and fought to defend his people. He would later be known as the Terror of Rome. If you want to see the battle from the eyes of Caio Betilio, from the Roman perspective, check out the channel of Nobles Escutari Rex following the link in the description. Now let's continue with Viriato. It all started in the year 150 before Christ, when that Roman rat, that dirty traitor, that wordless consul, had betrayed my people and had massacred and enslaved us by the thousands. His name, one I will never forget, was Servius Sulpicius Galba. At that moment, I swore that there would be no rest in the hearts of the Romans who stepped on the peninsula. I gathered my closest friends and together we started what would later be known as guerrilla warfare in the year 147 before Christ. My fame had crossed borders, and my name was known in the lands of the Betones, from where many warriors arrived who wanted to fight in my guerrillas. I was acclaimed leader of the Lusitanians and leading an alliance between my people and the Betones. With a total of about 6,000 men, we left the ancient lands of the Turdetanians to devastate the Roman province. It would be my first campaign with an army, and I really didn't know what I would have to face. I knew that the Roman leaders changed every year, and so did the number of troops, so I didn't know the number of enemies and who was leading them. We arrived at Roman territory. Our intention was to loot, because as I didn't know the numbers of the Romans, I didn't want to risk a pitched battle until that moment we had done well with the guerrillas. When the road split into 2 or 3, we always chose the one where no enemy troops were seen, and in this way without any resistance, we reached the city of Urso, deep inside the Roman province. We camped for the night with the idea of assaulting the city the next day. But what was my surprise when at dawn we saw that to the east and south there were Roman troops in battle formation. I could also observe another contingent of soldiers moving to cover the north. They were surrounding us. A messenger came and offered us peace on behalf of a certain Betilio and Rome. He told us that if we laid down our weapons and surrendered, swearing not to fight against Rome again, they would spare our lives and return us to Lusitania. I feared for the integrity of my army. A part of my men wanted to surrender, claiming that we were no match for the Roman legions. They weren't saying anything new. In an open field, we would clearly be vulture food. But we couldn't give up. Not now that we had awakened and risen again against Rome. I mounted my steed, and from the height it offered me above the foot soldiers, I addressed my men. I tried to convince them that we could not surrender to Rome, not anymore for the disgrace that would have brought upon our people, but because we could not trust the Romans. A single name was enough to make them change their mind. Servius Sulpicius Rufus. And upon hearing the name of that wretched Roman, my men raised their weapons, ready to fight the Republic. Thousands of throats roared, challenging the Romans to attack us. For here we were waiting for them. But that was a bad idea. I ordered my troops to disperse, to flee the battlefield to the west, towards Tripoli. I remember the Gorge in the Guadiaro River Valley. It would be a good place to surprise the Romans if they pursued us. I stayed with 1,000 men to cover the retreat, and we constantly attacked the legionnaires and retreated before they could reach us. The only thing we could do was to throw our projectiles, face the legionnaires who strayed from the group in hand-to-hand combat, and little else. But even so, we were achieving what we wanted, delaying their advance. The Romans felt helpless seeing that they couldn't catch us, so they advanced faster and faster, and it was difficult for the officers to keep their men in formation. As we approached the rendezvous point, I was ordering my troops to disperse and reach their positions for the ambush. I didn't know how the trap had been set, but I knew my men were waiting for me. Of that I was certain. We had to be careful not to fall into our own traps, because as soon as I arrived, I noticed there were holes with stakes covered with branches. Only we who were from the peninsula knew the terrain and which branches did not fit in with their surroundings. I reached the end of the gorge and turned around. I saw a man, who I suppose was Betilio, pointing at me with his sword from the other side while giving an order. And all the Romans rushed into the gorge like water finding a path to flow. The torrent of troops reached the first traps, but those behind kept pushing those in front, who fell into the holes and impaled themselves on the stakes. It was likely that having lost formation, the news of the traps did not reach the rear troops, and that's why they keep pushing them to death. Lusitanian battle cries echoed in the ravine, forming an echo that swore by the gods that froze the hearts of the Romans. Fireballs fell down the slopes of the gorge, impacting the already disorganized Roman formations. I could see how the Romans tried to reorganize, but the fireballs were followed by arrows and wave projectiles. Each legionnaire tried to save his own life, but they didn't understand that the only way to stop us would be for everyone to act as one. I looked to my sides and could see that I had more than 1,000 armed men ready for hand-to-hand combat next to me. Another round of fireballs fell on the Romans, finishing off their disorganization. It was the moment. I put my mount on its hindquarters and charged at the Romans. My troops followed me, and from both sides of the gorge, the Lusitanians and the Betonis charged at the Romans, sword in hand and shouting their battle cry. It was a slaughter. The Romans thought they had me, that in a few minutes they were going to capture me, but everything twisted for them in a single moment. The clash of my men against the Roman shields was devastating for the legionaries, and without a clear battle order, their heavy armors and large shields prevented them from fighting with the freedom that my men did. The Romans were falling by the hundreds. We also had casualties, but nothing comparable to what we were achieving. I looked for Betrayal, and there he was, surrounded by my troops, fighting with his sword for his own life. It was a shameful sight. The man was out of shape, he was fat, and he couldn't move easily on his mount. In addition, he was dressed for a parade, not for a battle. His sword likely hadn't seen combat recently. Suddenly I saw him fall and he disappeared among the tide of fighting men. Trumpets sounded, and the Romans began to retreat and flee from the battlefield. I ordered my men to stop. I didn't want to repeat the same mistake as Caro de Ceguera, chasing the Romans and confronting them in open field. No, we had a great victory. About 4,000 Romans had died in a matter of an hour. Compared to just 100 casualties on our side, it was time to plan the next campaigns. The morale of my men was sky high. We had shown the Romans that the people of the peninsula fought with all our soul against the invader, because we were born, lived, fought and died as free men. If you want to know the battle from the eyes of Caio Betilio from the Roman perspective, go to the channel of Nobles Scutari Rex, following the link in the description. If you want to know the context in which this battle took place, click on the videos that are shown on screen and don't forget to hit like if you liked it. If you also want to know more about the history of Hispania and discover more battles, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with new videos.